Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Telecast TV. I'm Miracle Angala. You're watching a conversation about hundreds of Muslims massacred in Kwara for refusing to join jihadists, which is Boko Haram or bandits. The governor declared on his X handle that dozens of people have been killed in a ferocious shooting attack on two villages in Nigerian western state of Kwara after they refused to surrender to extremists who preached a strange doctrine. According to the state governor on his X handle, he said they were massacred in the Tuesday raid, while a state lawmaker told the BBC that 78 people had been buried so far and the death toll could rise to an estimated 170 as more corpses were being discovered. Blaming Islamist militant group Boko Haram for killing, President Bola Tinubu deploys an army battalion to the affected area. Endeavor to subscribe. Watch to the end for full details. Comment, share your thoughts.
So, to the silence of a remote village which has been shattered by mass death and by urgent questions about security, intelligence and the reach of the state. In Woro village, a community tucked deep in Kwara State's north-central corridor, more than 100 bodies have now been recovered after a brutal overnight massacre. Homes were overrun, lives were erased, and as security forces continued to comb the surrounding bush for survivors and the missing, the true scale of the horror is still unfolding. President Tinubu has responded by ordering the deployment of a full army battalion to the area, a heavy show of force in a state long considered far from the epicenter of Nigeria's insurgency. No group has yet claimed responsibility, but the Kwara state government says terrorist cells were involved, while the president has pointed the finger at Boko Haram jihadists, a name once associated with the northeast, now echoing ominously further south. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line by the top security analyst and head of Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Dr. Adamu, thank you very much indeed for joining us. From what you know so far, does the Woro massacre bear the operational fingerprints of Boko Haram, or does it look like something else entirely?
Field of operation, we do not use the general. Does not.
Right. Okay. I'm afraid we're having a monstrous problem hearing you, Dr. Adamu. Again, the line seems to be just breaking up terribly. But my question was, while they try and see if they can sort of re-establish a stronger line, my question was whether or not this massacre, in your assessment, bears the operational fingerprints of Boko Haram, or whether it looks like something else entirely. Are we reconnecting with him? Right, okay. Let me return to you, Dr. Adamu. You were trying to answer that question about whether this is a Boko Haram attack or not.
So I was going to say that in the first place, there are different groups that are subsumed under the name Boko Haram. And in the case of Kwara State, the two groups that have been merged recently that fall under that category of Boko Haram are the group affiliated with the Sahel Jihadist group JNI that are sometimes called the Mahmudawas, or in some instances
just called Jihadists. In this instance, the hallmark, the bestiality of the attack does reflect the modus operandi of these groups, especially where, for whatever reason, the villagers have angered them. And in this instance, that indicated they had submitted letters. Letters were submitted about 5 months ago. Recently, about a week ago, in response to perhaps the refusal to allow them to exercise their own understanding of the Islamic Sharia, that they came back and then carried out the level of bestiality that we witnessed ago. At the end of that bestiality, we know that burials took place between yesterday and today, and the numbers are above 100 at the moment.
Well, I mean, more than 100 people, as you said, were killed in that remote village. I mean, what does that tell us about the level of planning, logistics, and local knowledge of the attackers?
In simple terms, the attackers are exploiting vulnerabilities that exist within space. One is the landmass. Two is the vulnerable and borders. Three is the circumstances of the country at the moment. And then, of course, the socio-economic conditions, poverty that have been allowed to fester. And then number five is the ungoverned spaces that exist within those locations. You can draw a line, a chart between Kwara, Niger State, and then parts of Kebbi State. And of course, if you look the other way into places like Cameroon, all the way into the Sahel. So sadly, these vulnerabilities are being exploited by these groups. I can add to the list that I've just mentioned, the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, criminal enterprises that see opportunities and then sort of bring into that eco space these terrorist groups that I've mentioned, and then the existence such as groups. So all of this, unfortunately, are things that have made North Nigeria and Northwestern, and to an extent, of course, Northeast Nigeria, fertile grounds for these groups to continue to propagate.
Well, you talked about this being fertile ground. I mean, Kwara State has never been seen as a sort of frontline state. And, of course, a massacre of this scale doesn't happen in minutes. I mean, where did Nigeria's intelligence and early warning system fail in your assessment? Was it at the local, state, or federal level? And is this a case of intelligence not being gathered or intelligence being gathered and ignored?
So first off, I think we need to admit the fact that there is a massive failure of national security priorities. The primary objective of national security is to protect lives. And where there is this failure of massive proportion, and I think we need to admit to that fact. And Charles, one of the things that worries me is really the way we have kept quiet and we've accepted to live with this type of bestiality. Over the weekend, in the last couple of days, more than 200 across about 4 states in Nigeria. Kwara State is one of them. Katsina State is another one. In Plateau State, in Benue State, even though the numbers were less than Kwara, but people, Nigerians, law-abiding Nigerians were killed. So this is in all ramifications a failure of security. And I think and this is a direct message to our political class, where we are playing kid gloves with this issue, having this level of failure, and yet we can't see any accountability. Yes, I do not have the knowledge at this time to say whether intelligence was provided or not. I think there is a need to conduct an investigation into what exactly happened. As far back as September last year, I wrote to almost all the security agencies to highlight what we're seeing in Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, the huge challenge that Kwara State is about to be confronted with. We highlighted all the factors that I mentioned here. We highlighted them. We also highlighted the proximity of Kwara to places like Niger State, and how it's just a matter of time before these groups use forested parts to move into parts of Kwara State. So it's not a hidden knowledge that Kwara State could fall into this cycle of, at the moment. The fact that we've allowed it to happen 4 or 5 months down the road, and the fact that there is no accountability in any form, even after these 200 people were killed, nobody has been held responsible. So I think we need to really wake up. We need to ask those critical questions, and we need to hold accountable. When you ask whether it's a failure at the federal or the state, at the moment, security the exclusive list. So it is a federal responsibility. But we also know that state governments do have some level of responsibility. They do collect the security vote. They chair the State Security Council. So to that extent, it is a responsibility that should be shared by the federal government and the state government. And we've seen already the Kwara State government statements going to the community and trying to show up confidence. We've also seen the statement issued by President Bola Tinubu through his his media advisor, including the battalion would be sent to Kwara State. We've also seen the Inspector General of Police mentioning that he would send a tactical team. All these actions after the incident, after the fact. What I think is important is to hold those that allowed this incident to occur accountable. At least it may give some level of reassurance that no other community, no other village, no other rural area in Nigeria will be attacked in the manner that we saw Woro community attacked.
And let me just say, Dr. Adamu, that we commend your efforts and the fact that you regularly produce those really good reports on security across this country, and the fact that you try and communicate with the powers that be to alert them to the information that is coming through to you. Now, you mentioned that President Tinubu has ordered the deployment of an army battalion. I was going to ask you that from a security standpoint, whether this is a deterrent or a reactive show of force after the damage is already done. But I think you kind of answered that. So let me ask you this. Can battalion deployments actually prevent future attacks, or do they themselves risk becoming static targets in an asymmetric war?
So it all depends on how the military strategy is conceived of and, of course, eventually deployed. If the battalion is seen as a standoff tool that operates on its own, then all that would likely happen, it would be a sitting target that would likely be attacked by these threat elements that have shown a resilience and a commitment that is shocking. So we're hoping that this is not a one-off, commitment. It is part of a broader strategy. I always, mention this fact that we do have a national strategy, one that in all essence and ramifications is a commendable commitment, and that we need to deploy and implement fully. Us to detect. It allows us to forestall. It allows us to, all the ramifications of a good counterterrorism strategy are in our national counterterrorism strategy. So I'm hoping that this battalion is part of that national counterterrorism strategy. We have a coordinator, counterterrorism, that sits in the Office of the National Security Strategy. So even if when this was envisaged, this battalion was not seen as part of our overall national counterterrorism strategy, I'm hoping that this would be done immediately so that they are not sitting ducks. The intelligence fusion that sits in that office should be part of what the battalion should be doing, so that if we're seeing movement, if we're seeing any composition, any threat actor that could affect the activities of that battalion, then we can fit them and they would be able to themselves and defend the community.
Unfortunately, I think we've now lost that line, but I want to thank him very much indeed. He is the top security analyst and head of Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited.